All right, today we're going to talk about triangles, and we're going to spend the next week or two talking about triangles. And so today we're going to talk about the basics of triangles and just a couple ways to classify them. So, a triangle, okay, is, and you guys should know this, a three-sided polygon. Okay. If it has three sides, then it also has three angles. And you've seen triangles probably since kindergarten. One fact about a triangle, and we'll spend more about talking about this tomorrow, is the three interior, remember interior means inside. The three interior angles of a triangle always add up to 180 degrees. And again, we'll spend more time talking about that tomorrow. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to classify triangles by the length of their sides. So the first way, we're going to classify by sides. So there's three ways to classify a triangle by looking at their sides. The first way is scalene. The second way is isosceles. And the third way is equilateral. Okay. So the first way is scalene. So if we look at the two pictures that we have, they're going to show you this in two different formats. They can show you with the tick marks. So what these marks on the sides mean, that this side with one is a different length than this side that has two markings. And those two are different lengths than this one. So all those little, they're called tick marks, T-I-C marks, tick marks. All they're showing you is that each one of those is unique. It's different. In this picture, where they actually give you some numbers, you can see very quickly, 12, 15, and 31, that all three are also unique. Okay, they're all different. So a scalene triangle is a triangle with three different side lengths or measurements. Okay, so in other words, none of your sides are congruent. No sides congruent. Okay. None of them have the same measure. Each side has a different measurement. So that is scalene. The second type that you can see is called an isosceles triangle. Again, two different pictures. Notice that this side has one tick mark and this side also has one tick mark. What they're showing you by marking the sides exactly the same is that they have the same length. So this side is the same length or measure as that side when they have identical marks. If you look at the second picture, you can clearly see 11 and 11. Okay, so that would mean this side and this side have the same lengths. So an isosceles triangle has at least two congruent sides. At least two. Okay, so scalene has no congruent sides. Isosceles has at least two. And then the last one we're going to look at is equilateral. So if we look at the first picture, I notice they all have the same exact markings, the same exact tick marks. So what they're trying to tell you is that each side, all of these sides here, have the same exact measure. Now with the tick marks, with the markings like that, we don't know exactly what they measure. We just know that those tick marks are telling us that they're all the same. If you look over here at the triangle with the numbers, clearly you can see they're all the same. And so an equilateral triangle has three congruent sides. All your sides have the exact same measure. And you can see the word equal in here. Okay, so equilateral is easy to remember because you can see the word equal. So that's the first way we're going to classify triangles. Scalene, isosceles, or equilateral. And you want to memorize these definitions. Okay, you want to know scalene is no congruent sides, isosceles is at least 2 congruent sides, and equilateral is 3 congruent sides. Now, the other way we can classify triangles is by looking at their angles. So, we can also classify by their angle measurements. Now, if you look down this list, there are 4 different specifications. Okay. And the first one is acute. So the triangle can be an acute triangle. It can also be, or not also, or it can be a right triangle, or it can be an obtuse triangle, or the last one, and it doesn't happen often, but the last one can be an equiangular triangle. So again, if we look at the pictures, okay, if it is an acute triangle, then the 3 angles on the inside of our triangle, because there's 3 different angles, this one, and this one. There's 3 different angles right there. If you look at each of those, they all measure less than 90. So to be an acute triangle, you have 3 acute angles on the inside. They all 3 have to measure less than 90. And you might want to write that down if you forget what acute means. Measure less than 90 degrees. The second kind of triangle we can find is a right triangle. We see this box, and we've run into this before when we talked about lines and intersecting lines. But when you see that box, okay, you know this angle is 90. That's the symbol to represent a 90-degree angle. And sometimes they will put the box, sometimes they'll just write the number 90. But to call it a right triangle, you will have one right angle. Okay, and only one right angle, because only one right angle can actually go inside a triangle. To call it an obtuse triangle, okay, again, there's 3 angles in my triangle. Here's 1, here's 2, here's the 3rd. Okay. An obtuse triangle has 1 obtuse angle. 1 obtuse angle. The other 2 angles will be acute, but as soon as you see that 1 obtuse angle, you're going to call it an obtuse triangle. The last kind, if you look at the picture with the numbers, the 60, 60, 60, a lot of times people get here and they want to say, oh, well, those are all acute angles, so I have an acute triangle. And technically, you're not wrong. Okay, if these all measure 60, like they say, then yes, they're all less than 90, so that would be acute. But that's not the best name for it. Okay, and if you were to put that for a picture with 60, 60, and 60, it would actually be marked wrong. Since all 3 angles are equal, you need to call it an equiangular triangle. Okay, that's what you have to call it. Yes, technically they're all acute, but since they're all the same, you have to tell us that, and you have to say it's equiangular. If you look at the second picture, notice there's no numbers, but notice how they mark them. Okay, this angle has the same marking as this angle, which they have the same marking as this angle. They are telling you that all of your angles are equal, and if all of my angles are equal, okay, if you take the total, which is 180 that they have to add up to, and divide it by 3, then each angle has to be 60 degrees, just like the first picture. Since all of my angles are equal, again, we're not going to call it acute, even though technically, yes, they're all less than 90. If all of my angles are equal, we're going to call it an equiangular triangle. So to call it an equiangular triangle, all 3 angles have to be congruent. Okay, and if they're going to be all congruent, that means each is going to be 60 degrees. So what you guys are going to see in the next video is when we do some examples, we're going to be looking at triangles and we're going to classify them by their sides. So we're going to say scalene, isosceles, or equilateral. And we're going to be also looking at the angles and saying acute, right, obtuse, or equiangular.